Along the way, of course, we were following the Flavians and their history in order to see how many parallels there could be to Jesus in the Gospels and to Christianity itself. We were sitting on a couch at one point in time, and we were studying the visit that helped Vespasian establish his bona fides in order to become the next emperor. And part of his tour around the Roman Empire involved him making certain affiliations with religions around the entire empire. Titus did the same thing with Venus when he visited certain Greek islands. Vespasian visited the Serapeum in Alexandria, the temple, the center of the Serapian religion. And once he was there, he was offered the chance to perform miracles, healing miracles. Well, as we looked at the miracles that Vespasian performed at the Serapeum, we immediately said, wait a minute, let's examine the miracles that Jesus performs in the Gospels. And lo and behold, they were identical to the miracles Vespasian himself performs at the Serapeum. Now, remember, at this same time, the Gospels were being written. So the Jesus miracles were being recorded at the same time, or shortly thereafter, that the history of the Flavians was being written by Josephus. And he's recording the miracles that were performed, and other, of course, historians at the time record Vespasian's miracles at the Serapeum. And here in Gospels written simultaneously are Jesus' miracles, which are identical to those miracles. And once again, every single time we looked at one of these comparisons, they always matched up and linked perfectly.
It was just simply fascinating in making the discovery that the pagan Roman historian from the 2nd century, Tacitus, who was writing early in the 2nd century, described the miracles of Vespasian in a way that does mirror those of Jesus in the Gospels, such as using spittle to cure a blind man, or healing a withered hand, and other miracles that were almost identical to the description of miracles of Jesus in the Gospels. And in the very course of describing those miracles and their taking place by Vespasian at the temple of Serapis, we then understood why Serapis would be used on Flavian coinage. And in doing that, we realized Tacitus himself had explained how the Ptolemies had integrated both Greek and Egyptian gods into the new god Serapis that was being used much later by Roman emperors. And so it's clear that in the Flavian emperors, we see this unusual blending of both Serapis, healer, god-man aspects that are being used by Vespasian alongside their claims to being the Jewish Messiah. Precisely the same parallel of events that we see in the Gospels. A God-man, Jesus, performing Serapis-like miracles, but also being the Jewish Messiah. Something distinctly and uniquely shared by the Flavian emperors, who were the emperors at the time when the first Gospels were being written.
Because of the Flavians' humble origins, it was important for them, in order to ascend to the throne of Rome, to affiliate themselves with religions around the entire empire, which had been fractured by a civil war of succession after the death of Nero and the Jewish War. All of this threw the empire into upheaval. And so, in order to heal those wounds to the empire, Vespasian and his son would put extra effort into gaining the acknowledgement of religions around the empire, including Serapis, Venus, and, of course, the Jewish religion, which had been the source of the Great War with Rome.
It is simply astonishing. It was astonishing to me as I was starting to read the background, the biographies of Vespasian and Titus that are given by the 2nd century historian Suetonius. More and more I began to realize that the Flavians were attempting to integrate a wide variety of religious influences in order to give them legitimacy. As we say, politics and religion were the same thing, and there was no sharp demarcation, no sharp lines separating religion and politics. To be a legitimate political ruler is to have the support of the gods or the one Jewish God, if you believe in just one God. And it was as though every religious tradition of the Eastern Mediterranean was being used by these emperors of humble origin to give them divine support and legitimacy over all of the conquered peoples of their empire. Their own humble origins even were featured as opposed to being hidden. You know, the old sales tactic, if you can't fix it, feature it. And so rather than having this illustrious aristocratic family tree that traced back to the goddess of love, Venus herself, that the Julio-Claudians had had, they needed to invent religious legitimacy sort of from scratch, promoting their origins from poverty and humble beginnings. And to do that, they had to invoke every religious tradition they could in the Eastern Mediterranean, including claiming to be the Jewish messiahs.
And they sought out the endorsement of religions throughout the empire during this period.
As we continued our investigations, we realized that the Roman Empire at the time had certain inhibitions against calling their own emperors gods. And in Rome itself, in the first century, it was not considered morally appropriate for emperors to call themselves living gods. And normally their official deification would only happen after their deaths, and only to the emperors who were popular or considered good emperors. In the Eastern Mediterranean, for centuries before the Roman Empire, I discovered, and it's well-known history, those emperors, such as the Ptolemies or the Seleucids, claimed divine ancestry, claimed divinity themselves. In the Eastern Mediterranean, rulers were used to being worshipped as living gods as they were rulers, and that was a critical part of their own political legitimacy. Rather than be able to claim in Rome that they were living gods, in the Eastern Mediterranean, even during the lifetimes of the Flavian emperors, we begin to see them worshipped as divinities associated with a variety of Eastern gods.
Because Vespasian and Titus hailed from the East, and their great victories that gave them a claim to the throne of Rome in the wake of the death of Nero, they associated themselves with the sun god, who rises in the east, but not in Judea, only in Rome. In Rome, Judea is to the east, and therefore could be associated with the sun god.
One of the fascinating discoveries I made was that pagan Roman propagandists, using Flavian propaganda, one of the prophecies, one of the prodigies that predicted the ascent of the Flavians, if you will, was a statue in Rome that actually was said to have turned on its own will towards the east, as if now the gods are looking east to their new divinity. And sun god imagery associated with Serapis or with Apollo would naturally follow that.
And would help endorse the Flavians as the next emperors of Rome.
And it's astonishing, as we read the Gospels, to find all the associations of Jesus with the sun god. I myself then looked anew at the fact that Jesus is resurrected at dawn in all four Gospels. In the Gospel of John, he gives himself the very title of the sun god, the light of the world. And in so doing, you can see that there are Apollo images, sun god images being integrated into the Gospels themselves, which aren't necessarily, as has been pointed out, associating anything with a god who rises in the east. They're already in the east.